Today we're going to multiply and divide decimals. Today's a review lesson. Our goal is to apply and extend previous understandings to multiply and divide decimals. Let's look at our first problem. A piece of paper measures 3/10 meters by 6/500 meters. First step, estimate the total area of the piece of paper. Go ahead and look over your problem. Look at what is 3/10 close to, what is 6/500 close to, and what do you think the total area of the piece of paper is going to be when you estimate. Go ahead and take a minute to estimate now. You can share your predictions with your neighbor in the next 30 seconds. Now that you've finished your estimate, let's take a quick review. So here we have your typical base 10 blocks. We have hundreds, tens, ones. And of course, when we use these, we can often create situations where we have one whole and then the tenths and hundredths places. So today we're going to use these a little differently so we can represent whole numbers as well as decimals or fractions. For these purposes, we're going to represent them a little differently. The hundreds base 10 blocks will represent one whole, and the tens will represent the tenths place, and the ones will represent the hundredths place. So think of it as a decimal being here. So if you had 2 and 33 thousandths, for example, that would be 2 wholes, 3 tenths, and 3 hundredths. So that's how we're going to use them today. Now when multiplying, a common mistake is students will often forget the decimal. For example, if they had 2/10 times 6/10, some students will give me 18. Of course, we remember that whenever we multiply, we do ignore the decimals while we're multiplying, but then we move them the amount of places over as we see after each decimal. So we have 1, 2 places, for example. And in your answer, you start at the end if you don't have a decimal, and then you move it to the left, 1, 2 in this case. So it should be 18 hundredths. So that's been a nice quick review. Let's look at our examples. So let's look at our example once again. A piece of paper measures 3/10 meters by 6/500 meters. So first thing we have to do is estimate the total area of the piece of paper. Now we're going to use a smart estimate. So when thinking about these numbers, think of numbers that are easy to combine. Well, you know that 3/10 and 6/500 are both close to certain numbers. For example, compatible numbers. 3/10 is close to 2/500, which would be 1/4. And then we have 6/500, which is actually kind of one of those numbers that's in between 1/2 and 3/4. So if we round it up, we can just think about numbers that would make sense. If I had 1/4 of 3/4, that would be 3/16. And in these cases, I can also just look at my numbers that I find close or compatible. If this was 3/10 multiplied by 7/10, that would give me 21 hundredths. So I know that my answer is going to be a little bit less than 21 hundredths. So there's how we can do some little estimation. Now we can make a labeled sketch of the piece of paper and use it to calculate an exact answer. Now we're going to look at our next set of directions. Make a labeled sketch of the piece of paper and use it to calculate an exact answer. Well, in this case, we've had different kinds of models, so we can kind of think about the best kind of model that works for you. So in previous lessons, we've used area models. So we have one whole, and then we would have 3/10, and I'll shade those in. And then we would multiply that by 65 hundredths. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths. And the 5 hundredths is half of a tenth, so we could draw half of that. And then basically everything that overlaps would be, of course, in green. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So that's 18 tenths so far. 18 and a half tenths plus another half would be 19 tenths, which would be 19 and a half tenths. So that would be 19.5 tenths. Well, another word for that, of course, remembering previous examples, is 195 thousandths. I've been saying tenths. Those individual squares are hundredths, so my apologies for making that mistake. So it would be 195 thousandths. See how Miss Salvador just caught a mistake. So remember, these are, of course, hundredths. I hope you caught that while I was teaching it. So my answer would be 195 thousandths. So there's another way we can make a labeled sketch that actually will probably be easier and pertain more to your level of calculation in an area model. But remember, we can check this with our estimate, which we said, of course, it needs to be a little less than 21 hundredths. Well, 195 thousandths, again, think of decimals as money, and if you want, you can add the 0 at the end, is a little bit less than 21 hundredths. Now, the other way we've done this, of course, is to write the number on top, 3/10, which would be 0 wholes and 1, 2, 3/10 times 65 hundredths. Do that in another color, which would be 0 wholes and 65 hundredths, which we can then just put into a nice, neat, singular grid. So we have 0, 3/10, and 0 hundredths. And then we have 6/10, 0 wholes, and 5 thousandths. And then we can just multiply. 0 times 0, 0 times 3, 6/10 times 0, 6/10 times 3/10, which is 18 hundredths, 5 times 0, and 5 hundredths times 0, and 5 hundredths times 3/10, which is 15 thousandths. And I'm going to write the 0 in front of it just to remind myself, and then you can add those together and you would get 195 thousandths. So both of these methods would work effectively when multiplying. So now we've taken it a step further. We've looked at numbers that aren't just in the tenths place when multiplying. We're now looking at the hundredths place. So you have one more problem, and I want you to try that at your table groups. Go ahead and take a minute to pause this video and try the second problem before we go on to division. right, good job with the previous lesson. Let's look at our division problem. A package of gum costs $1.38. There are 6 sticks in the pack. How much does each stack of gum cost? Well, in order to do this, we can use our old-fashioned long division. We have $1.38 divided by 6. So we want to know the menu for 6 pieces. So when we think of division, it's kind of like repeated subtraction, just like multiplication is repeated addition. So we can use this, of course, to see how much it would cost for 1 stick, 2 sticks, 3 sticks, etc. So this is our multiplication menu for 1 38/100, or $1.38. So now we can start with our long division. 6 cannot go into 1, so I have a 0 in my ones place, and I bring up the decimal when dividing. Now if I had a decimal here, of course, I would do my lovely moving over rule on both sides, which is just like multiplying by 10. But in this case, I don't, so it's a mixed number divided by a whole number. So of course, I'm going to actually show all my work, and I want you to do the same. Bring down my 3. 6 can go into 13 2 times. 2 times 6 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. Bring down the 8. And 6 can go into 18 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18, and I have no remainder. So I know that 1 is 23 cents. So 1 times 23 hundredths is 23 hundredths. Now I want you, of course, to write down the same amount for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And there's different ways you can calculate this answer. You can multiply by 23 hundredths. So I'm going to rewrite 23 hundredths nice and big so you can easily see it. Or you can use repeat addition. So I hope that's helped you with the classwork. Make sure you're being very good for any substitute or any teacher you have. Go ahead and finish up this problem and finish up the rest of the problems. Early finishers have extra worksheets and extra activities you can be doing. So great job today. Make sure you sit quietly and work cooperatively to solve your problems. Remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. Remember, only positive attitudes in each group and only positive behavior from your teachers. Great job today, and I look forward to seeing you when I get back.